Hi, it's Winton Churchill with the Barefoot Consultants, and I'd like to welcome you to our Facebook Friday. And today we're going to talk about three steps that every freelancer, sort of 50 plus, uh, should take when they're moving from whatever they're doing now. It could be being an employee, working in an organization, that kind of thing. Uh, or they might be semi-retired or retired, but because there's been such a big opportunity created by freelancing these days, a lot of people are going back 50 plus into the workforce as a freelancer instead of being an employee. And of course, we've all heard about this thing called the Great Resignation. The Great Resignation is sort of people going back into the office for the first time in almost 2 years, and they're saying, I don't want to do this anymore. They've had too much of the taste of that remote worker life, and they say it's just not worth giving up the things I have to give up in order to be back in the office. And they're willing to forego, in some cases, bigger paychecks. Also, willing to forego the commute and the extra wardrobe they have to have, and maybe the extra car they have to commute in, and the extra time they have to spend away from their family, and the fact that they come home and they're completely exhausted from a day at work. So lots of things to consider as people go through this. But sometimes that decision to go from freelance to or from working as an employee in the office, but out to freelancing, it's not a paved path, really. And one of the challenges that I've noticed in the people that we work with is that when have been in an organization for 5 years, 10 years, there's a lot of support services around you. There's a flow of customers that maybe happens because other people are in the organization are helping that to happen. So there's lots of considerations to think about as you move into the freelance world. The good news is that millions of baby boomers have done it successfully. And, success leaves clues. There's lots of ways to get there. Virtually many skills that you have, probably dozens, are in demand. When I talk to people, just got back from Las Vegas, an international living conference, and it was great. It's our first conference in over 2 years, and it's wonderful to be able to talk to people and help them figure things out and help them understand what their skill set is and their domains of knowledge are and that kind of thing. And a lot of baby boomers, when they approach this topic for the first time, say, gee, I don't know what I could do online. And of course, there's lots that we can do. Usually after we have about a 10 to 20 minute conversation, we've got about a dozen different things that you could do online that would be the so-called perfect fit. And so that's what we want to help you understand today, is that making that list, and it typically is a list, pencil and paper list or pen and paper, because in our 14 years of doing this, we find that people produce much better lists when they're working with their handwriting and pen in hand and notebook and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of research out on this now that points out that your brain is much more activated and sort of, if you will, spun up at a level that helps you produce those pieces of information as you go through that. So let's just briefly talk about what those are. The first thing, skills, and you know how to use maybe Microsoft Word, might use Microsoft Excel, might use PowerPoint. There might be some specialized software that you use. Certainly there's functional activities in your job. What we want to do is break down the work you do into the functional subcomponents of that, if you will. You might have the job title as director of marketing strategy or something like that. but you work with 90-day plans, you work with the advertising department maybe on planning advertising schedules, you work with other parts of the business that might be introducing products over the next year or services, that kind of thing. So you want to break your occupation down into its component parts. And one of the things that I have found is that this working with PowerPoint presentations is a big thing. When I was coming along, in the early 90s, once PowerPoint came out, that was a pretty important part of everybody's day in certain departments and certain organizations, and depending upon what your job skills are. And what you would be surprised to know is that most people today of younger generations did not have that skill. They did not learn PowerPoint for the most part. And as a result, there's, thousands of jobs that involve PowerPoint on networks every day where somebody has maybe created the content for a presentation, but wants your help in some cases just to put it into a presentation because they don't know how to do that. Or in other cases, they may want you to help them organize the information, which is something that in my work for many years, I did. I helped people put together presentations and organized them and shared slides and clip art and photographs and all that kind of stuff. So that addresses to a degree, the skills. But if you go Google skills in demand for working as a freelancer, you'll see lots of other things that might pop up when we have this conversation with our members and people that come in and where we help them with their profile. There's a ton of other skills to go to. In one network alone, there's 1,000 different skills listed, and it could be anything from knowing how to do project management to having experience doing customer service of some kind or some kind of industry experience. The next part of step one is understanding what knowledge you have. If you've been in an industry over a period of years, in many cases, decades, what's happened in that industry and the major pivot points in that industry and that kind of thing. And that knowledge is very powerful. When you're competing against a freelancer that might be in their 20s or 30s, you have a much longer look at the industry, and you bring that perspective to every job you do. So that can be very powerful. And then we talk about domains of knowledge. It could be industry experience. It could be something from your volunteer activities. Maybe you've helped with scouting or little league or fundraising for the various charities. All those are skills that are in demand online. And just because it's not what you did in your career doesn't mean it can't be a fruitful area for working online. So something important to know. And the other thing is wisdom. And this comes from solving problems. And recently, there's been research that has come out that speaks to the way the brain is organized and how it processes different things. And every time you solve a problem, it could be figuring out how to find your shoes underneath the bed, or it could be solving a strategic product launch for a major company. But every time you go through that process, there are lots of little decisions and insights you have as to how to solve that problem. And so the each time you solve that problem, you have a new set of connections in your brain that help you solve other similar problems. And so that's really where your wisdom lies. And you want to write down on this list, because this is what you get paid the most for, is when you can bring that wisdom to the job that you're doing. So you want to think about that. The skill might be PowerPoint, but the wisdom might be knowing how to put together a PowerPoint. If you were like me, I can imagine I probably put together 500 or 600 PowerPoints over my 20 years in corporate America. So there was probably quite a bit of learning. It was for different departments, different circumstances, sometimes services, sometimes products, sometimes briefings that HR we had to do for our departments because some new rule came along or compliance issue came along or that kind of thing. So if you had a life like that, you may have had many different, uh, you know, uh, pieces of wisdom accrued over those decades. And, the bigger the problem, the more new neural pathways that you have in your brain. And many freelance buyers realize that. They get that. When I talk to freelance buyers and they say, what's the thing you value most in 50 plus freelancers, they say they've got a big perspective. I don't have to tell them how their project, whether it's proofreading or making a PowerPoint presentation, fits into the big picture. And they place the appropriate weight and importance on delivering on time, in delivering the way I like to see it. And that's what they really value because they listen, and so that's a plus that you as a 50 pluser have in going into the freelance market, and certainly something that's very uh, worthwhile. Now, the next step in this process is going into some of these online networks and putting in some of those skills so you can just get an idea of what people are looking for. And I'll give you an example because this is one of the hardest things that we train people to do is if you say came from the financial industry, maybe banking, retail banking, and you were very good at putting PowerPoint presentations together, you might go in and select in the search PowerPoint, just type it into the window of one of the major sites like Upwork, and then you also put in your industry connection, retail banking or whatever it might be. And when you pop that in there, you will see all the jobs that are include a PowerPoint component and a component from retail banking. Now, oftentimes, people get a little confused on this. They don't understand the 80-20 rule. And this is, if you want to take a look at what this means, it means that, 20% of those results that you will see might be a fit and 80% of them won't. And this is a very important thing to understand because when I first share this with somebody, they come back to me sometimes and say, "Oh my God, 80% of the jobs I found were they didn't pay enough, they were crummy, they weren't things that I would ever want to do." And in the world of business, the 80-20 rule is called the Pareto Principle. So you can look up either of those words or both of them and read more because I don't really have time to go into it here. But why getting 20% of those things or even 5% of those things is a fantastic sort of first pass at this. And every freelancer really has to understand this 80-20 rule in order to be successful because they misinterpret what they're getting. Many times in a corporate environment, our work was spoon fed to us. So there was just a continuous supply coming in and we just did the work. But now it's a little bit more like prospecting for gold. We have to know how to find it. And if you've ever been to one of those, sort of tourist stands where they let you pan for gold, you realize that you have this big dish and they drop a big clunk of mud in it and you spend about 20 minutes sort of swishing it around and the mud rises to the top and goes out with the water that's in there. And at the bottom of this, after about 20 minutes, you'll see usually a few little flecks of gold. Now, every day isn't like that when you become a freelancer, because the way we teach freelancing is you want to cultivate clients that give you repeat business. And just to extend the PowerPoint example, if you know how to do PowerPoint well and you understand well the industry of your client, they don't want to go into one of these systems and find another freelancer. As long as they're happy with you, they're happy to keep working with you. So very important concept in that. Now, on most of these sites, you can get a taste of what jobs look like without having to put in a profile, which is a profile is kind of like a resume, but it's very different. But some of these sites wisely, in fact, Upwork in the upper left hand corner of their home page has a way that you can view some of the jobs that are in the system. And so, would encourage you to do that and type in some of the phrases that make sense to you. Look at some of the jobs. Just know that if 1 out of 5 jobs there is something that's a fit for you, that's a good thing. You're looking for the jobs you can do, not the jobs you can't do. Usually, what we try to do is get people's search criteria to the point where they're getting down to uh, uh, an actual dozen to 2 dozen jobs that they look at on a daily basis. It takes about a little bit of trial and error to get to that point, maybe a week or two of getting familiar with the system and that kind of thing. But that's what you want. These job sites have, you know, hundreds of thousands of jobs on them. One I looked at this morning, the largest one has 325,000 jobs on it today. And, even 100 jobs is too many to evaluate on a daily basis. And that's why we place so much emphasis on fine tuning the words in your skill set and the words in your domains of knowledge, because any single one of those will produce too many results. It's the combination of those two that narrows the jobs down to the ones that are going to be perfect for you. So, as somebody considering freelancing, you want to look at these systems and find out which keywords produce what kind of jobs and get a sense of the kind of work that is out there. Most people that I work with are very pleasantly surprised. They see more jobs than they ever thought they might see. They're very excited about what they see, and they're amazed that somebody is interested in skills they have, and industry knowledge, domains of knowledge from their volunteer life and their hobby life and their special interest life and that kind of thing, all popping up in there. And then the third step you want to take is think about how you're going to get support. And I'm going to suggest an exercise here for you to do, when we're done with this. But people that work in corporations, uh, you know, like I was for 10, 20 years, different places, but kind of the setup was the same. And most places I had or shared an administrative assistant, and there were certain things that were delegated to that person, like putting together my expense reports and also communicating with people on my schedule and scheduling appointments and that kind of thing. And you want to think about the things that, if you're stepping out of a corporation, of things that you might need support on. You can hire a virtual assistant between $15 and $25 an hour on these systems, and maybe they only work for you a few hours a week, as you get started. But they're doing uh, the kind of work that is they're best suited for, because they like doing that kind of work. I mean, I'm somebody that uh, would prefer to have somebody handle that for me, because my earning is higher than that. And when I'm focused on conversations with clients and helping them with the things that they do, it's that's the best use of my time in most cases. Now, as you're starting a business, there's always times where you're also sweeping the floor and doing all the things that people do when they start a business. So nothing wrong with that, but you want to spend most of your time as a freelancer in uh, delivering productive work, or uh, you, in your efforts to find new work and new clients. And everything else is sort of secondary, especially as you're getting started. The great thing is that with these networks, there's a great many ways for other freelance buyers to see how you're going to come on to that uh, network, and what you've been doing for other people, and how you're going to help them do what they do. So, very interesting sort of jobs when you go into freelancing. You need somebody to maybe help with the bookkeeping. You might need somebody to help with appointment scheduling. You might need somebody to handle general correspondence, so you can free up your day to work in long blocks of time in order to maximize your efficiency. You don't want to be in a situation where you're checking uh, emails from coming into your inbox or that kind of thing. If you have somebody looking over your shoulder, just checking a couple times a day, that might be part of your overall agreement with them to be a virtual assistant for you. So, very important things to consider as you go into freelancing, and very much a great way to um, learn what the opportunities are for you as a freelancer. So, happy to answer any questions you might have. This great resignation thing, we hear about it on the news, and a lot of times in the news we don't get the whole story. To hear it, you would think that youngsters are jumping out of their corporate offices into the world of digital nomadism. And actually, what's happening, there's been some analysis done on this, is that 90% of the people taking advantage of the Great Resignation now are over uh, 50 years old. And so that's an important, puts a new perspective on that. This appears to be a phenomenon of people at age 50 and above saying, there's not enough juice in the squeeze, as it might be, in order for me to get excited about going back to work and working in an office and putting myself back into my car or on the train to commute and all those kinds of things. So, uh, lots of you're in good company if you're 50 plus. Many people thinking about, uh, you know, ditching the job as an employee and going into this world of freelancing, where they've had their, sort of their own personal sample of freelancing for almost 2 years now, where they're working remotely, they're conversing with people on Skype or Zoom or one of those services, and they're getting work done. And they didn't have to, you know, get dressed in their business clothes, and they didn't have to commute for a half hour each way, and they didn't have to put up with some of the nonsense that occurs in offices. One of my least favorite things to do was meetings. And it's funny because about half the meetings are really good, and I enjoyed being in them, and they were valuable to the work I was doing and to the company I was with. But then you also have this other half of your meetings are, kind of a complete waste of time, and you don't want to do that. That sort of thing in this environment, because you've already had your taste of not having to put up with that. And how often do people in corporate America call up meetings with a meeting planner and find, it goes out and finds a time on your schedule for you and a bunch of other people to get together, and blam, you're scheduled into a meeting that really is just going to be a waste of time, and everything in your day also might have to revolve around that meeting because of the time it takes, and that sort of thing. So lots of things to think about. 3 simple steps. You want to come up, number 1, with your skills, knowledge, and wisdom, and I suggest you write those down. You should have a page or two full of notes. You don't just know the pharmaceutical industry, depending upon which aspect of that you were in. You might know about monoclonal antibodies. You might know about vaccines. You might know about anything. You might know about major financial events that occurred over the last 20 years. You might know about the major breakthroughs in the pharmaceutical industry over the last 20 years. And all that knowledge is valuable to people wanting to put together jobs. So then the second thing you want to do is go to these freelance networks. Upwork's a great example. In the upper left-hand corner, they let you search some of the jobs and see some of the jobs. So that's very helpful to see if there's a market for the kind of stuff that you do. And we want to apply the 80-20 rule to the people that or the assignments that you look up, because if just even 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 is a good fit, for many people, that is the beginning of a multi-thousand-dollar relationship. It just takes one client. And as we focus on it in our training, we want you to do repeat business. This is what really helps build the profitability of your business. It's expensive to take on a new client every day. And that's what we want to help you avoid. We want you to do a really good job for the best clients that represent an opportunity for repeat business. And through those efforts of yours, they continue with you, and other similar people in that same area or field are referred to you, because the algorithm in these systems can see that you're applying these skills and you're doing good work in this industry. So they recommend similar jobs to you, and they recommend you to the freelance buyers that are posting similar jobs. So lots of good things to do. And then the other thing is figuring out your support profile. What does that look like? What kind of things are you absolutely going to need? Some of those you might need on day one. Some of those you might need 6 months in. So, for example, in the area of bookkeeping, a lot of people get the ball rolling. And I interviewed an accountant a number of years ago who talked about this for a freelancer. And what he said: work for your first 6 months, and then go see your accountant and say, this is the kind of work I'm doing. This is the amount of money I'm making. And, talk about bookkeeping, talk about what form of an organization you should have. Some people work individually. Some people work as an LLC. Some people work as a corporation. And your attorney or your accountant can give you their best advice if they have some stuff to share. And don't make the mistake I did when I started my freelancing business 21 years ago. And I went in and said, well, I might do this. And my accountant, who I love, would give me explain, well, that would be this kind of organization. And then I said, but I could do this other thing. And he said, well, that would be more towards this organization. And he was answering the questions that I was asking him, but far better to go out and do it for 3 months, 6 months, and see what kind of work you're going to be doing, what kind of volume of work, what kind of earnings you're going to have. And based on that, you can have a much better conversation with your accountant or lawyer to have them help you decide what are the best choices for you. So with that, I wish you a happy weekend and a smooth transition from employment to freelancing. And stop back by next Friday, because we'll have another series of tips, clues, hints, and that kind of thing that will help the 50-plus person make that transition to the world of freelancing. So have a great weekend. Be sure to ask any questions in the chat. We do answer those in the chat. Most of the people that watch this watch it as a recording rather than Facebook Live on Friday, and that's one of the things that we're able to do thanks to all this technology we have. So you don't have to be here right now, but you can listen to the playback, and we appreciate all those people that do follow us on the playback. So have a great weekend. Take care.